Nicolas Cage. It is no surprise that the Oscar-winning actor was destined to be an amazing talent. Born Nicholas Kim Coppola, the movies were in his blood. It all started with his great-grandfather Coppola, who lived above and owned a movie theater during the 1920s. He imported movies from Italy for the Italian immigrants in the neighborhood. The next generation brought Nicholas's grandfather, who was an Oscar-winning musical score composer. After that came famous uncle Francis, and then his daughter Sophia, both Oscar-winning directors. But for Nicholas, it's not just a case of working in the family business. With one Oscar already under his belt, this actor's talent runs so deep that he can play any genre, any time period, any character, and succeed.
I have scripts that come to me that are from across the board. There are comedies and actioners and dramatic films, and that's really where I wanted to be. I wanted to have the luxury, because I'm kind of a complicated guy.
On January the 7th, 1964, Joy Vogelsang and August Coppola welcomed their third son into the world in Long Beach, California. Joy was a celebrated dancer and choreographer, while August was a comparative literature professor who also taught film. Nicholas actually compared his father to legendary screen actor Sean Connery.
I grew up with my father, who's a man who's very intimidating to be around, because he has that sort of larger-than-life presence, like he's going to start conducting Beethoven at any minute, and he looks like Sean.
Unfortunately, Nicholas's parents divorced when he was only 12. His mother, Joy, was a very creative woman, but she was also a depressive and found herself in and out of hospitals, leaving Nick plenty of time to be on his own. He took refuge in his collection of comic book heroes and movies.
I think whenever the family structure does not provide a lot of care for a young person, the young person is going to find a way to soothe. This can take the form of going into a fantasy world of comic books or movies where the hero wins and the villain is punished. A very safe place where the young person can find nurturing and soothing.
You know, I loved film, I loved movies. I was trying to find a way into the TV set when I was 6 years old, and then when I was 14 I discovered James Dean in East of Eden, and that really connected me with film acting. It made it clear to me that this was something, you know, that can really move people.
As a teenager, he'd already found his calling. During his 15th year, Nicholas enrolled in San Francisco's American Conservatory Theatre. At just 17, Nicholas decided to incur his father's wrath and drop out of school. He decided school was over, acting just couldn't wait a minute longer. At first, the famous Coppola name did the trick, and he landed a bit part in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But he was extremely upset when most of it landed on the cutting room floor. Then, in 1983, Nicholas helped his uncle Francis out with the auditions for Rumblefish. Well, he was so good at rehearsing opposite the other actors that he himself landed the part of Smokey. As he said so, it wasn't a cakewalk.
Fear, discomfort, not knowing what to do, out of my element.
He got another part the same year for a teen comedy called Valley Girl, and this time it was pure luck, no nepotism involved. What happened was a casting agent was considering people for the part of the punk rocker Randy in the film, and she stumbled upon Nick Cage's picture and thought, this is the guy for the job. He landed the role, and there was no looking back. It was his big break. No longer wanting to ride on the coattails of his famous family name, he officially changed his name to Cage.
Acting for me has kept me balanced. I've acted because, I needed to. It was a survival thing. It channeled a lot of stuff, that I had as a young man.
In 1986, Uncle Francis called upon his talented nephew again for the comedy period piece, Peggy Sue Got Married. Coppola had to defend the decision to cast his nephew to studio execs, but it paid off. The movie did get considerable attention for the young actor, particularly from singer-actress Cher, who persuaded producers to cast him opposite her in the hit comedy Moonstruck.
Okay, Moonstruck. Scary, fun, exploring. Moonstruck certainly was my sort of introduction into the romantic genre.
The film was a smash hit. Nicholas won a Golden Globe and Cher won the Oscar that year.
The unique actor also caught the attention of the talented directors, the Coen brothers, who decided to cast him as a very quirky character in their comedy Raising Arizona. Nicholas, in order to interpret the role, channeled a cartoon character.
Woody Woodpecker is a character that has brought me a lot of laughs as a child, and I thought it was interesting to model this H.I. McDonough in Raising Arizona after Woody Woodpecker's personality. It was very liberating, a liberating chance to not try to be so natural, not try to be so real, to break free.
Coming up, Cage opens his heart to a young Patricia Arquette.
Talking with Patricia for just a couple of hours, the 23-year-old decided there and then to propose marriage. He thought he just found his soulmate. 1987, he happened to be at Cantor's, the famous Hollywood all-night delicatessen, and he bumped into 19-year-old stunning and up-and-coming actress Patricia Arquette, and the two of them had a lot in common, both coming from Hollywood dynasties. Talking with Patricia for just a couple of hours, the 23-year-old decided there and then to propose marriage. He thought he just found his soulmate. Well, Patricia was not convinced and was actually a bit spooked, and she asked him to come up with a list of impossible, virtually impossible things that he had to do before she would say yes. Well, she got even more spooked when he actually started to produce some of those things. So she turned him down. Marriage would have to wait till a bit later on another chance encounter. In 1990, the 26-year-old starred in the dark, twisted drama Wild at Heart. Well, David Lynch, the movie's director, was so impressed by his intensity and talent, he called him the jazz musician of all actors. The new role opposite Laura Dern was perfect for Nicholas because he'd always been absolutely obsessed with Elvis and had his own collection of Elvis memorabilia. Again, it was an example of how he used his own personal experience and passion to really get into the role.
I had looked to artists, other artists, and what they had done, and I thought, well, why can't that be done with acting? I thought, well, I'm going to take Elvis and I'm going to put my own interpretation on it.
Nicholas had been paired with a number of gorgeous Hollywood women over the years, including Uma Thurman, but it wasn't until he was 28 that he met a woman who really changed his life completely. Model actress Christina Fulton. They had a child together, Weston Coppola Cage. And fatherhood, of course, was very significant, but it also brought around a kind of change in the tone of his next few roles.
This was a change for me. I called it my Sunshine Trilogy. It started with Honeymoon in Vegas, and Darling Test was one of them, and then now this. It Could Happen to You. I wanted to change for a while. I'd done enough of the sort of outlaw, dark characters, and people were starting to think that I really was crazy or an outlaw. And I thought, no, you got this wrong. I'm acting. I'm going to show you that I can act, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a very normal good guy.
But in his real life, things weren't so good. He broke up with Christina, although they did try to keep amicable because of their son. But in his movie life, Nicholas recognized that the kind of roles he was taking, which were pretty light-hearted at the time, did help him to stay positive.
It was a long road because to get where I am now, I had to go through some changes. There were some times, some pretty lean times, and luckily I had comedy to draw on. I had neglected the instinct, my natural instinct to be funny, because I had idols like James Dean and Marlon Brando, and so I was trying to do these sort of angst-ridden characters. Well, at some point people got tired of that, and then I had to switch gears and reach down and pull up, the comedy capability, and I think that got things going again.
With the new responsibility of a child, Nick did turn his life around quite a bit and accepted his responsibilities seriously. He stopped some of the hell-raising, he stopped smoking, he stopped his fast racing, his driving. He did, however, keep some of his passions, including his collection of exotic cars.
Besides the personal reasons for making popular feel-good movies, Nicholas saw them as long-term investments for his career.
I realized at a certain point that it is called show business, you know, and I know that I can get movies made if my movies sell. Right now I'm about to make a movie called Leaving Las Vegas, which is a little movie. But because I'm going to do it, I can get it financed, and it's an art film, which I'm really looking forward to doing.
Leaving Las Vegas was a huge departure from the comedies Nicholas had been focusing on for the last few years.
For me, the joy of acting is to keep changing not only characters, but also styles, genres.
With his usual veracity, he puts everything into his performance of the depressed, suicidal, alcoholic character, fueling his own anguish to really portray this character with an extraordinary intensity.
Leaving Las Vegas was another growing experience for me. It was, I think, a seminal film in my career in that everything came into focus with Leaving Las Vegas.
Everything also came into focus for the Academy of Motion Pictures when Nicholas won the Best Actor Oscar for the role. He had a myriad of reactions to his win.
But it was important to me because I grew up in a family where, other people in my family had Academy Awards. And so when I got it, and it's impossible, I don't care who you are, to not get caught up in it, it was like this validation where I could say, well, okay, guys, let's talk, I felt it was important to me in a family way.
And Nicholas's family had just got bigger. One spring afternoon, he went to his favourite haunt in Hollywood, Cantor's Deli, again. And who should he bump into? As if fate had intertwined, it was Patricia Arquette. Now, by this time, both of their careers were well established, and each of them had a son. They got on like a house on fire once again, and this time, after 2 weeks, it was Patricia who proposed. They got married on her birthday in April 1995, and Patricia was his date for Oscar night.
Patricia was very happy that night for me, and I was happy that she was there.
Nicholas's next film was another departure for him. In 1996, he became an action hero in The Rock.
I think The Rock was a turning point. That was an interesting time in my life, really, when I think those two pictures really encapsulated where I wanted to go with my work in general. The dichotomy, if you will, between the action and the in-depth character analysis tone poem that is Leaving Las Vegas.
Leading a colossal blockbuster was new territory for the quirky actor.
Well, it's a very daunting feeling when someone says you're going to carry a $70 million movie. I figured that with Jerry Bruckheimer and Michael Bay, I'd be able to create a character and do the action movie on my terms, which was not to play a steroid guy or a robot, but somebody with, average but good qualities that can, rise above the obstacles and save the day just on willpower and positive attitude and intelligence.
Nick is off the wall. Nick is a little bit more experimental. He needs to feel pain to be good, I think. I think he likes the pain and agony and the turmoil and oh God, this is terrible and I can't be funny today.
The Rock was a smash hit. Now that Nicholas had nailed the action genre, scripts were flying in. In 1997, the buffed-up 33-year-old played a newly released ex-con and former Army Ranger trapped on a prisoner transport plane. As a Jerry Bruckheimer production, the movie was sure to be an action-packed ride.
Well, Nick is a brilliant actor, and, fortunately he won an Academy Award, so it's just not me just saying it. The Academy agrees with me. And, Nick is an actor that I want to work with again and again.
We just have a nice, natural film chemistry. I don't try to get too analytical about it because it works, so we basically leave it alone and let the creative process flow.
Wild and full of real action, Cage was not just smoke and mirrors.
I'm used to doing mostly, what you might call art films. And when I started doing action movies, I realized that you have to think about that gun over there shooting blanks and that wall of flame over there, and you have to act at the same time. So I learned quick that you've got to keep your wits about you.
Coming up, Nicolas Cage goes to jail.
I was on the yard with 3,000 hardened killers, and that's a weird feeling.
Nicolas found the perfect director and co-star to round out an action genre trilogy.
I've been a big fan of John Woo, and I really thought Travolta was terrific in Pulp Fiction, so I've been wanting to work with these guys for a while.
The experience was everything Nicolas had hoped for.
Face Off was a joy to work on. I mean, it was a very playful experience. John Travolta is somebody that really captures the spirit of acting in the funnest sense. We just had a good time working together.
And as he promised, Nicolas totally changed course again in his next film, City of Angels. He played an angel who falls in love with a human woman played by Meg Ryan. Researching the part proved to be a challenge.
I had to read books. I couldn't really prepare the way I would normally like to. You can't call an angel up, and say, what's it like? One of the things that I came across was that by some definition, all angels are terrifying, which I thought was interesting. Normally we see the angel played as this sort of singing, golden light character, and I thought that this would be a chance to play as something a little more eerie, give it some complexity.
And director Brad Silberling found that Nick had the unique qualities to make the character Seth come to life.
I felt when I was reading the script the first time and every time subsequently that we really needed somebody with the strength of a silent film star. So much of the Seth character that we meet is without words. I'd always admired Nick's work, but I sat down with him. What I saw in his eyes was remarkable. I mean, he was able to convey so much without opening his mouth. So he was sort of the perfect choice. I can't imagine it now with anybody else.
The movie was a hit, but always restless for something new. That same year, Nicolas tried his hand as a shady police detective in Brian De Palma's Snake Eyes.
With City of Angels, I was more reserved. So by the time I got to Snake Eyes, I was excited to go. I wanted to get out of my, tight jacket and just explode. The background is that it's fight night, and there is an undeniable energy in a boxing match that's in the air, and so I wanted to really get that across in the first 20 minutes. Lock the door!
Although their marriage was reportedly rocky, in 1999, master director Martin Scorsese cast the couple in a dark drama, Bringing Out the Dead.
I've been wanting to work with Scorsese he's one of the reasons why I became an actor.
Nicolas recognizes that there is a setback to having appeared in so many action pictures.
The only thing I'm trying to look at is that people do not get confused by it. That this is Bringing Out the Dead, and there's Nick, and he looks like a paramedic. It must be an action film about ambulances. And then they go and they see it, and it's really kind of a harrowing examination of the sadness of living with loss.
And in 2000, Nicolas jumped back into action as a master car thief in Gone in 60 Seconds.
Oh, Nick's great. Nick's a really good guy, and he's a buddy. We got the giggles all the time, and he's just fun.
Working on such material requires highly specialized training.
I like to drive. I like to drive fast. I like to have an opportunity to do something that I sincerely enjoy, and to do it in a way where I'm getting paid for it is even better. I just wanted to make sure I didn't destroy any of the cameras that were mounted on the car. There were like $500,000 or $400,000 cameras, and if I'd taken one of those out, that would have been pretty humiliating.
Nicholas and Patricia's marriage was falling apart, which wasn't really surprising because 5 years ago, when they'd actually got married, they hardly knew each other.
When you come from an unstable family structure, then frequently, as you mature, you may be looking for that. And when you meet a new person, you may want to lock that into something like a marriage, a relationship, when really what you're trying to do is recreate some structure from your childhood.
Nicholas filed divorce papers in 2000, only to retract them. He then filed again a few months later, and the couple were finally divorced in May 2001. But Nicholas had already set his sights on someone else, the beautiful Lisa Marie Presley. Anyway, after a tempestuous relationship, the two were married on August 7th, 2002. Rumour has it that Lisa Marie was not too pleased that her husband was spending so much time with his son, being actually a devoted dad. Rumour also has it that he wasn't pleased that she persuaded him to sell some of his prized vintage cars and his precious comic book collection, even though that netted $1.5 million. The two split up 107th day after their wedding date.
In the meantime, the 2002 John Woo period piece Wind Talkers opened with much fanfare. The film told the story of an army sergeant ordered to protect a Navajo code talker.
Alright, reel and act. I have nothing but incredible respect for Indian culture and the Navajos and what they did in the war. That people know about this is important to me.
Actor Christian Slater also played Sergeant Ox Henderson in the film.
Nick Cage is great. I mean, he's just always been somebody I have admired as an actor and always wanted to do something with. And he's just, he makes unique, interesting choices and just really, I think, learned a lot from him and found him to be very spiritual, really just had a great vibe.
In spite of their good experience on the set and the interesting material, the film tanked at the box office. It seemed to be following Nicholas's private emotions at the time. But it wasn't long before the dedicated actor found refuge in another meaningful and edgy independent film.
I'm about to embark on a picture with Spike Jones, a picture called Adaptation, which I think is still very much that oeuvre. So I'm trying to just keep changing it up.
In the independent film Adaptation, Nicholas played a tormented screenwriter facing writer's block and his Bond-to-Bond identical twin brother. Once again, he blew away the Academy. Nicolas Cage was nominated for an Oscar for Best Actor in 2 leading roles. Nicholas's reaction to his Oscar nods continue to be practical and hopeful.
I hope that the Oscar will give me is that 5 extra seconds of thought before someone says no.
With hardly a moment to catch his breath, Nicholas was back on the set playing a phobic con artist in Ridley Scott's Matchstick Men.
I've always wanted to work with Ridley Scott. I've admired his movies for a very long time, and I've felt that he has an original vision. It gave me an opportunity to hopefully learn something by studying or observing a maestro at work.
Next came the fun adventure romp National Treasure, in which Nicholas starred as Ben Gates' treasure hunter. The film was received with warm reviews.
Nick's personal life was also warming up. In February 2004, he reportedly met Korean Alice Kim at a club called Bazzi. The impulsive romantic was smitten with the lovely Alice and began frequenting the upmarket, upscale sushi bar where she worked as a waitress and hostess. Then one night he presented her with a diamond. 2 months after his divorce was final and less than 6 months after he'd begun dating Alice, the couple were married in July 2004 in a private ceremony in Northern California. While making The Weatherman in early 2005, again Nicholas drew on the method and went deeply into the painful divorces and separations he'd been through to play Dave Spritz, the hapless weatherman who had also separated from his wife in the film.
I was going through a divorce at the time, and I was using that well of feeling, that emotion, that wasn't positive. It was bringing me down, and I didn't want to succumb to it. So when I read this script, I thought, I can do this. Let me take that feeling and put it in there. I won't have to act, and it'll be real, and I'll do something constructive rather than destructive.
In fact, Nicholas was very constructive at the time. His wife, Alice Kim, became pregnant in early 2005 and gave birth to a baby boy on October 3rd. In an homage to his long-held love of comic books, Nicholas named his new son Kal-El, Superman's birth name on planet Krypton. The second-time father compares fame to fatherhood.
You know, it's kind of like parenthood in that nobody can really prepare you for it. You know, yeah, this is great, but then you realize the huge responsibility of that.
Nicolas Cage certainly appreciates all the opportunities his life as an actor has given him.
I've been very happy with the way things have turned out, and I can't complain. I mean, basically, it's the movie career has given me a lot of ability to do things I probably wouldn't have been able to do, so I'm happy.